Sarah Reyes had been deaf since she was 4, the victim of a case of meningitis that flooded her inner ears and left her world sealed in cotton silence. 26 years later, the silence felt as familiar as her own pulse. She navigated offices and coffee shops with brisk, practiced lip reading and the easy flutter of ASL. Yet when her audiologist told her she was a good candidate for a cochlear implant, Sarah surprised herself by agreeing. It wasn't that she felt broken. Curiosity, more than longing, pulled her towards sound, a curious itch to know what everyone else took for granted. The surgery was a blur of anesthesia, the healing, an exercise in patience. On activation day, she sat in a white examination room, electrode coil clasped to her scalp like a small plastic seashell. Dr. Kwan tapped a keyboard. A hiss, a strange electric river, spilled into Sarah's skull. It wasn't music or voices or even noise as hearing people described it. It was an alphabet of sparks. Then Dr. Kwan spoke, and the sparks knit together. "Can you hear me?" His words arrived in fragments. Robotic vowels dunked in metallic reverb, but Sarah could match them to his lips. She laughed. An astonished, shaky sound she barely recognized as her own. The following week, Dr. Kwan warned, would be dizzying. Brains rewired themselves slowly. The sounds might seem distorted, overloud, or ghostly. "Give yourself grace," he said, patting her shoulder. She took the bus home, the world now sheathed in a soft, constant blur of street noises folded into rustling foil. Car engines resembled irritated lions. Children's laughter was a spray of chimes. She slipped her phone from her purse and opened her notes app, determined to catalog every oddity. Soda can opening, cracking icicles, dog barking, chains rattling, a scientist studying her own senses. That night, she lay in bed unable to sleep. The implant's external processor rested on the nightstand, but the internal electrodes continued to tingle like phantom limbs. She dreamed she was underwater listening to whale song drift through coral. When she woke in a sweat, she realized the whale song hadn't stopped. "Sarah," a voice whispered. Her heart bucked. She hadn't left the processor on. Nothing should be transmitting. "Help me," the same voice croaked, soaked in static. Sarah bolted upright. Shadows smeared the apartment, moonlight on drywall, outlines of furniture. No phone alarms, no neighbor's TV, only the voice, thin, wet, urgent. Then came a crack, a gunshot, or a door slamming. White noise rushed after it, like wind in a tunnel, and somewhere inside the roar, muffled screaming. Sarah yanked the covers around herself, trembling. Hallucination, she thought. Auditory hallucinations were common during adjustment. She'd read forum posts, but this felt too vivid, carved out of someone else's terror. When the voice finally faded, she forced herself to breathing exercises until dawn. She dressed for work, convincing herself exhaustion had invented ghosts. At the architecture firm, fluorescent lights hummed overhead. Her co-worker Marcus greeted her with a thumbs up. She caught the words, "How's the new ear?" on his lips. Sarah answered with a shrug. Yet at lunch the static began to bleed into her perception again, faint at first, until a man's hoarse shout cracked like lightning across her skull. "Give me the money." Sarah dropped her salad fork. Across the cafeteria, no one reacted. The shout was inside her, threaded through the implant. Gunshots. 2, echoing off cinder block walls. The cafeteria's low chatter and clinking silverware continued undisturbed. She pressed her palms to her ears anyway, as if she could muffle electrodes buried inside flesh. Later, back at her desk, she Googled. Yesterday, around midnight, a bodega clerk 3 blocks from her apartment had been shot twice during a robbery. Surveillance footage captured the gunman's words. "Give me the money." Same phrasing, same ragged timbre. Sarah stared at the article until the letters blurred. She looked at the timestamp. The murder occurred minutes before she'd heard the first phantom voice. Coincidence, her logical brain insisted. Yet her gut twisted. That evening she sat across from Dr. Kwan as he recalibrated frequencies. She debated telling him about the hallucinations, decided against it. The moment she described ghostly voices, he would flag her for psychiatric evaluation, postpone further mapping. She needed more information before she risked that. Instead, she opened Reddit threads on clairaudience, electromagnetic sensitivity, fringe message boards about implants as spirit antennas. She rolled her eyes at homemade diagrams of chakras, but bookmarked every link anyway. The third night, the ghosts returned with ferocity. A woman sobbing, heels slapping pavement. "He's following me! Help!" Sirens, a screech of tires, a grunt as flesh hit metal. Then silence jagged as broken glass. Sarah paced the apartment, counting the seconds until the air stilled. She opened her laptop, breath hitching. Hit and run in South Bronx, timestamp 10:37 p.m. Victim, Rebecca Liu, 32. Witnesses heard her cry for help moments before impact. Sarah's pulse battered her ribs. She realized the voices were not merely echoes. They were timestamps, tethered to the precise minute the crimes happened. She was hearing them live, albeit distorted by whatever membrane separated the living from the dead. A splinter of duty wedged inside her chest. If she could hear these crimes, maybe she could stop the next one. But how? The audio arrived without coordinates, a radio station broadcasting fear. All she had were fragments, tone of voice, stray phrases, ambient cues. Still, tonight's hit and run included squealing tires, honking horns, a subway rumble. Maybe she could triangulate. She turned her screen to Google Maps, plotting the South Bronx intersection from the article. Rebecca Liu's pleas had reached Sarah 15 miles away in Queens, through walls, across boroughs, and inside her skull. Distance seemed irrelevant. The dead and dying did not respect geography. Days passed. Sarah learned to parse ordinary sounds from spectral ones. The living possessed density, vibrations traveling through air, while the dead arrived weightless, as if etched in radio static. She carried a small notebook labeled Voices, clipped descriptions, time, any clues she could glean. Distant carousel music, chalk dust smell. That note stumped her until the news of a stabbing outside Coney Island's boardwalk confirmed it. Still, all she did was archive. Courage was theoretical. Action meant risking ridicule, arrest, or worse. Fighting armed criminals guided only by disembodied pleas. And yet each entry in her notebook throbbed like an unresolved chord. A month after activation, the implant had become part of her. Dr. Kwan praised her rapid adaptation. Sarah nodded politely. She no longer heard only the living city. She straddled two. On a Tuesday in March, during a rare lull at work, the world around her inverted. Office chatter receded to a low drone, replaced by a child's shriek, so piercing Sarah bit her lip. "Mommy, don't let him!" Then a baritone snarl. "Shut up!" Furniture scraped, glass shattered, a thump. Sarah grabbed her coat and bolted without explanation. Outside, sunlight glared off downtown steel. The voice still rattled her bones. "Help! Please help!" the child sobbed. She flagged a taxi. "Harlem, 146th and Lenox," she said, unsure where the address came from. It slid from her tongue like muscle memory. The driver glanced in the mirror, questioning but accelerated. The further north they drove, the louder the phantom scene became, aligning with real streets. Sirens distantly converging, neighbors yelling. When the cab turned onto Lenox, Sarah spotted a brownstone with its door half off the hinges. Smoke leaked from shattered windows. "Stop!" she ordered. She threw bills at the driver, sprinted. Inside, heat licked the air. A kitchen fire. In the living room, a man stood over a cowering boy, belt in hand, oblivious to growing smoke. Sarah's fear crystallized into action. She snatched a ceramic lamp, swinging until it crashed into the man's shoulder. He howled, dropped the belt. The child scrambled behind the sofa. Alarms wailed somewhere above. Maybe someone had dialed 911. Sarah grabbed the boy's wrist. They bolted outside into daylight, coughing. Neighbors poured onto stoops. Sirens crescendoed. The boy, maybe 8, stared at her with saucer eyes. "Thank you," he rasped. Police dragged his father out moments later. EMTs checked the boy. Firefighters doused the kitchen. No one questioned how Sarah happened upon the scene. Smoke inhalation made details blur. She slipped into anonymity. That night she studied her trembling hands. The ghosts had steered her, and she had answered. Adrenaline tasted scorchingly sweet. The notebook was no longer enough. She started running after work, physically training, she told friends. In truth, she practiced pursuit, vaulting fences, sprinting alleys. She signed up for a self-defense class, then a firearms safety course. Her co-workers teased her about a secret vigilante phase. Sarah smiled noncommittally. April ushered in a chorus of murders, robberies, and rapes, each one soaking her implant like black ink. She reported what she could. Anonymous calls to Crime Stoppers, typed tips to precincts using burner emails. Sometimes she arrived first, guiding bleeding victims toward first responders. Sometimes she arrived too late, and the echoes turned into post-mortem murmurs begging for justice. The city tabloids noticed. Mystery informant tips police. One headline barked after 2 kidnap victims were found alive in a warehouse minutes before their captor returned. Detectives fumed on evening news segments, suspicious yet grudgingly grateful. Officer Louis Hanley knocked on Sarah's apartment door in May. His badge glinted. She pretended not to understand his rapid speech, fell back on sign language. Hanley sighed, asked questions via written notes. Did she know anything about the anonymous tips? She shook her head, gaze wide with feigned innocence. Eventually he left, but not before scanning her implant curiously. 3 nights later she awoke to a whisper unlike the others, calm, measured. "He's still alive." Sarah sat upright. "Who?" "Anthony Cullen," the whisper answered. A woman's voice, seasoned with grief. "He killed me in 1999. He's planning to kill again." Images flared behind Sarah's eyelids. A warehouse with red brick arches. Neon graffiti of angel wings. The murmur of a river nearby. She swallowed. "Where?" "Pier 31, the ghost breathed. "Tonight." Sarah dressed in dark jeans, hoodie, gloves. She tucked pepper spray and a pocket knife inside her belt. The subway screeched, rattling her nerves. The ghost guided her like sonar, volume increasing with each stop toward the waterfront. Pier 31 was abandoned, chain-link gates sagging. Moonlight skimmed rusted cranes. Sarah climbed a hole in the fence. Inside the warehouse, her steps echoed across warped planks. Near the center, floodlights snapped on, blinding her. An arm locked around her throat from behind. She gasped, clawing. "Didn't expect company," a man muttered by her ear. Anthony Cullen. His mugshot had floated across her research. Assault, suspected serial rapist, never convicted. Gray stubble, shark eyes. "How'd you find me?" he growled. Sarah jammed an elbow backward. It bounced off muscle. He wrenched her implant processor, ripping it free. Silence cut her world in half. Panic flared. Yet somewhere beneath, the internal electrodes still faintly buzzed. The ghost's voice surged, bodiless now. "Left pocket, box cutter." Sarah thrust her hand toward Cullen's jacket, seized the blade inside. She slashed downward, catching his thigh. He roared, grip loosening. She spun, dislodged, and ran toward stacked crates. Blood dripped from his leg, but he limped after her. She ducked behind a shipping container, heart hammering. Without the external processor, every sound was amphibious. She relied on vibrations, on the ghost's guidance. "He's grabbing the pipe," the woman warned. Sarah felt the faint tremor of footsteps. She hefted a rusted fire extinguisher, waited. Cullen rounded the corner, swinging a metal pipe. She discharged the extinguisher, white powder exploding into his face. He coughed, blinded. She struck his injured thigh with the canister. He collapsed. Police sirens wailed outside. Someone had called them. Maybe a night guard. Sarah pressed the extinguisher to Cullen's throat. "Confess," she mouthed, not sure if he could read her lips, but certain the ghost could interpret. "For her." His eyes darted wild. The powder coated his lashes like ash. "Who the hell are you?" "Someone who listens," she said. Officers burst through the doors, guns drawn. Sarah raised her hands, letting the extinguisher roll away. They cuffed Cullen, stunned by the evidence. Gag, ropes, chloroform rag prepared near a tarp. Another woman would have died tonight. At the station, Detective Hanley recognized her. "We meet again," he said, leaning across interrogation room glass. "You saved someone, but you also trespassed, assaulted a suspect, interfered with an investigation." Sarah folded her arms, refusing to answer questions. Without her processor, she only caught fragments. Hanley sighed, rubbed his temples, and finally slid her belongings across the table, processor included. "Turn that on," he said. "I'll talk slowly." She reattached the magnetic disc, the world flooding back. "We could use your help," he said. "However you do it." Sarah's throat tightened. "You wouldn't believe me. Try me." She considered telling him about the voices, about the dead riding electrical currents into her brain. But confiding meant tests, labs, maybe losing the implant. She shook her head. Hanley exhaled. "I'll pretend tonight never happened, but one day secrecy will cost you." He opened the door, jerking his thumb toward the hallway. "Go home." Outside, dawn smeared lavender over rooftops. Sarah walked until the city awoke. Bakeries rattling shutters, cyclists clipping down avenues. The ghosts were quiet, like children sleeping after nightmares. She reached the Queensboro Bridge just as sun ignited the river. Cars whizzed by, horns pecking the air. Sarah turned the processor volume down, but not off. She had fought for this threshold, between silence and sound, between living and dead. And she would not retreat. When the next echo came, it was faint as moth wings. An elderly man gasping, water slapping hulls. Somewhere, another crime unfurled. Sarah straightened her shoulders. "I'm listening," she whispered. Wordlessly, the city answered.